Sophia sat in the dust of the Kazbek training range, her rifle across her lap, listening to the wind tug across the barren valley. The mountains stretched like jagged walls, sharp ridges cutting the horizon, their shadows swallowing the ground in waves of shifting gray. Around her, the rest of the unit laughed. It wasn't laughter born of camaraderie, it was aimed at her, sharp, dismissive. "Sniper Queen," one of them muttered with a crooked grin, and the others picked it up like hyenas circling prey. She pretended not to hear. She had grown used to the name. She wasn't the biggest, wasn't the loudest, wasn't the one flexing muscles in the gym or cracking jokes over rations. Sophia was quiet, sharp-eyed, reserved. A lean figure with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes the color of burnished steel. She carried herself differently, as though her mind was always 2 steps ahead, scanning terrain the way most people scanned a room. But that wasn't enough for the men around her. In their world, strength meant swagger. She was a target simply because she wasn't one of them, and because she was too good with her rifle. The emerald lay heavy against her legs, its matte black frame glinting faintly under the sun. It wasn't just a weapon to her, it was an extension of her body, something she understood in ways the others didn't. She had trained for years, not just firing rounds but studying wind patterns, the curvature of the earth, the delicate physics of a bullet carving its arc across miles of atmosphere. She knew how to breathe, how to slow her pulse, how to wait for that perfect moment when body, rifle, and world aligned. But for now, none of that mattered. All they saw was a woman carrying a rifle they thought was too big for her. 3,000 meters, one of them said that morning, smirking as he adjusted his scope. "No one here is making that shot. Not even you, Queen." The challenge hung in the air. They all knew the world record hovered near that distance, and most of them didn't even attempt past 2,000. It was a dare meant to humiliate her, to push her into proving something and failing. Sophia just looked at him once, her face unreadable, then went back to checking her ammo. That calm silence irritated them more than if she had argued. When the range officer finally called for long-distance trials, the mocking grew louder. They all set up, rifles aligned, bipods dug into dirt. The targets were distant specks of steel, barely visible to the naked eye, shimmering in the heat haze like mirages. At 3,000 meters, even spotting them felt impossible. The others took turns, their rounds cracking through the air, most falling short, a few clanging against closer plates. Dust clouds marked misses, laughter followed each failure. When it was Sophia's turn, the line grew quiet, not out of respect, but in anticipation of her humiliation. She lowered herself into position. The earth was rough under her stomach, but she barely felt it. The world around her narrowed to scope, wind, and heartbeat. She closed one eye, adjusted for elevation, read the flags rippling in the far valley. She could almost see the invisible river of wind streaming across the mountains, shifting in unpredictable currents. Her fingers brushed the dial, making minute corrections. Her breathing slowed. In that silence she felt them watching, waiting to laugh. The first shot thundered out. The recoil pushed into her shoulder, steady, expected, like a familiar handshake. Dust plumed near the target, close but off. She adjusted again, her mind calculating the correction instinctively, the way a pianist adjusts fingers across keys. She ignored the mutters behind her. The second shot followed, ringing out into the distance, then a pause. One of the spotters frowned. That almost hit. Sophia didn't smile. She didn't let the flicker of satisfaction break her concentration. She adjusted again, her hands calm, precise. On the third shot, the valley seemed to hold its breath. The round arced, flying across nearly 2 miles of air, through shifting winds, across the invisible curvature of the earth. A long moment later, the faintest metallic clang echoed back across the silence. For an instant no one moved. The sound seemed unreal, ghostly, impossible. But it was there. A hit. She didn't celebrate. She didn't turn to them. She simply chambered another round, adjusted again, and fired. Another long silence, another sharp clang. This time there was no mistaking it. The spotter swore under his breath. The laughter died in their throats, replaced by stunned silence. 2 hits at 3,000 meters. Not luck, not accident, proof. Sophia lifted her head slightly, her face calm, eyes cold. She finally looked at them, one by one, the so-called brothers-in-arms who had mocked her for months. She didn't need to say a word. The steel plate in the valley spoke for her. The Sniper Queen had just done what none of them could, and history itself would remember the shot. The echo of that second hit hung in the air longer than the sound itself. It silenced the valley, silenced the men who had laughed, and even silenced the faint breeze that had toyed with the dirt around them. Sophia rose from the ground slowly, brushing dust from her sleeves, her face a calm mask. Inside she felt the steady thrum of her pulse, but she refused to show it. She had learned long ago that victory wasn't about shouting, it was about letting others drown in the silence of their own disbelief. The range officer, a veteran with 20 years in uniform, stared through his binoculars for several seconds before lowering them. He looked at Sophia like he was seeing her for the first time. "Confirmed," he said, his voice carrying across the line. "2 hits. Target at 3,000 meters. His words were crisp, official, undeniable. The silence cracked as murmurs rippled through the unit. Some shook their heads, muttering excuses, "Must have been luck." Wind shifted in her favor, the spotter screwed up, but their voices lacked conviction. Deep down they knew the truth. Sophia walked past them, rifle slung casually over her shoulder, and for the first time that day the laughter didn't follow her. Instead their eyes did. Some with resentment, others with a grudging respect they weren't ready to admit. She didn't crave either. Respect and resentment were just different masks of the same insecurity. All she wanted was to keep moving forward, to push past the limits others accepted as walls. That night the base buzzed with whispers. Word spread faster than wildfire. Soldiers who hadn't even been on the range claimed they'd seen it, each retelling the moment with exaggerations, how she had nailed the target on her first shot, how she'd hit 3 in a row, how she hadn't even blinked when she fired. The legend was already growing, reshaping itself in the mouths of others. Sophia ignored the noise. She sat alone in the armory, carefully cleaning the emerald, the methodical rhythm of her hands steadying her thoughts. She knew what was coming. The next morning she was summoned. The base commander himself wanted a report. When Sophia entered his office, the man didn't waste time with pleasantries. His desk was littered with printouts, ballistic charts, range reports, photographs of the steel plate with fresh bullet scars. "You made history yesterday," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Do you understand what this means?" Sophia stood at attention, her face unreadable. "Sir, I was just doing my job." The commander leaned back, studying her. "Your job," he repeated, almost amused. "Do you realize no one in recorded history has made a verified shot at that distance under those conditions? Do you realize you've just rewritten the manual for long-range engagement?" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "They call you the Sniper Queen. I don't care for nicknames, but after yesterday, it seems the title might stick." For the first time, Sophia allowed the faintest flicker of a smile. Not pride, but acknowledgement. She didn't want fame. She wanted recognition of skill, precision, discipline. If people needed to crown her with a title to understand it, so be it. By evening, news had leaked beyond the base. Defense circles picked it up first. Specialist forums, tactical blogs, military insiders passing along the unbelievable report of a woman nailing 2 consecutive shots at 3 kilometers. Within days it reached the wider media. Headlines spread across international networks. Record-breaking shot by female sniper. Sniper Queen defies limits of ballistics. 3,000-meter MRAD shot verified. Sophia's name was suddenly everywhere. With fame came scrutiny. Some called it impossible, demanding proof. Grainy footage from the range circulated online, sparking debates in comment sections. Was it staged? Was it doctored? Could a bullet even travel that distance with accuracy? Experts weighed in, arguing over ballistics, atmospheric drag, and weapon capability. But the official confirmation from the base commander, backed by independent observers, ended the debates. It had happened. The impossible shot was real. Back in the barracks, the men who once mocked her struggled with the shift. Some avoided her eyes, ashamed. Others doubled down, their pride too brittle to admit they were wrong. One even muttered to a friend, loud enough for her to hear, "Just because she got lucky once doesn't make her a legend." Sophia ignored him. Legends weren't made in a day, but the foundations were laid in moments like this. She understood that better than anyone. A week later she was reassigned. Orders arrived from higher up. She was being transferred to a special operations unit, one that needed her particular skills. It wasn't just recognition, it was a test. They wanted to see if she could turn history into a weapon, if her calm precision under pressure could serve where lives hung on single shots. Sophia accepted without hesitation. She didn't crave the spotlight, but she craved the challenge. As she packed her gear, the MRAD carefully cased beside her, one of the younger recruits approached. He looked nervous, shifting on his feet. "Ma'am," he said awkwardly, I just wanted to say, that shot you made, it was incredible. I've never seen anything like it." His sincerity cut through the haze of arrogance she'd been surrounded by for months. She nodded once, a small gesture, but it was enough. On the night she left, she stood by the range one last time, looking across the valley where steel targets gleamed faintly under the moon. She could almost hear the distant clang of her bullets striking home, echoing across time. She adjusted the strap of her bag and turned away. The world was already calling her Sniper Queen, but Sophia knew titles meant nothing. The battlefield ahead would demand more than a name. And she was ready. The transport plane droned through the night sky, its engine steady against the dark horizon. Inside, Sophia sat strapped into a webbed seat, her rifle case secured at her feet. The dim red lights bathed the cabin, painting everyone's faces in shadows. Around her sat men hardened by years in the field. Operators with reputations whispered in training camps and briefing rooms. They glanced at her occasionally, some curious, others skeptical. None spoke much. Special operations units weren't places of chatter. They were places of results. Sophia kept her gaze forward, her mind already working through the mission brief. Somewhere in the mountains of a hostile border region, a high-value target had been sighted, an insurgent commander known for orchestrating attacks that left entire villages in ashes. Conventional forces couldn't touch him. He moved too fast, too smart, too hidden. But tonight a joint task force was moving in. And Sophia had been assigned to provide the one thing that could end the mission in a single breath: Overwatch. When the plane touched down on a makeshift strip, the air was thin and cold. Sophia moved with the unit, her gear weighing heavy but familiar. They trekked under moonlight, their figures blending into the jagged ridges and black valleys. For hours they moved in silence, their boots crunching against loose gravel, their breath misting in the night. Finally they reached the overlook. From here, through her scope, Sophia could see the faint glow of a compound tucked against the mountain, its walls crude but fortified. She set up the MRAD with deliberate precision, bipod sinking into rock, scope adjusted for range. The distance was extreme, over 2,500 meters. The kind of shot most operators wouldn't even attempt in live combat. But Sophia didn't hesitate. She felt the wind tugging at her face, read the way dust curled in the night air, listened to the mountain breathing around her. Numbers and angles swirled in her mind, settling into instinct. The commander of the unit crouched beside her. A broad-shouldered man with a face carved by war, he studied her quietly. "You really think you can hit him from here?" he asked. His tone wasn't mocking, it was cautious, measured, as though he needed to weigh whether to put men's lives in her hands. Sophia didn't look up from her scope. If he steps into the open, he's finished. Minutes passed like hours. Below, figures moved in and out of the compound, guards pacing with rifles slung over their shoulders. Then the target appeared, emerging into the courtyard, surrounded by lieutenants. He carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed distance and darkness protected him. Sophia's breathing slowed. She aligned the crosshairs, adjusted for the wind that shifted between mountain passes, accounted for the drop of the bullet across nearly 2 miles of air. Her finger brushed the trigger, steady, patient. For a moment, everything stilled, the unit around her, the night wind, even the pulse in her veins. Then she squeezed. The shot cracked across the mountains. A second later, the courtyard erupted. The target collapsed, his body crumpling before his guards even realized what had happened. Chaos followed, shouts, panicked movements, the compound thrown into disarray. The operators moved in then, fast and precise, storming down the ridge. Sophia stayed behind the scope, picking off threats as they appeared, guards scrambling onto rooftops, sentries trying to rally. Each time, her shot found its mark before they could lift their weapons. By the time the unit breached the compound, resistance had collapsed. Minutes later, the commander returned, his breath heavy, his gear dusted with dirt. He crouched beside her again, staring at the compound below. "One shot," he said quietly, almost in awe. "You ended it with one shot." Sophia didn't respond. She simply cleared her rifle, locking the bolt open, letting the silence answer for her. Word spread fast. Operators didn't usually speak of missions, but some feats were too sharp to keep quiet. Around campfires, in briefing rooms, in whispers carried across bases, the story grew, how the Sniper Queen had ended a warlord's reign with a single bullet. Some called it impossible. Others called it inevitable. Either way, her legend deepened. But legends came with shadows. The more her name grew, the more she became a target. Enemies circulated her picture, vowing revenge. Online networks filled with threats. Insurgent leaders began instructing their fighters. If you see a woman with a long rifle, take her alive, or kill her fast. Sophia understood the weight of it. Every shot she fired didn't just end a mission, it carved her deeper into history and into the crosshairs of those who feared her. One night, weeks after the mountain mission, she sat alone on a ridge, her rifle beside her, staring at the stars scattered across the sky. The silence pressed in around her, and for once she let herself exhale the weight of it all. She remembered the voices that had mocked her back at the range, remembered the sneers and laughter. Now those same voices were gone, replaced by silence and awe. She wasn't proud, not exactly. Pride was for people chasing medals. What she felt was something different. A recognition that she had crossed a line few could even imagine. Behind her, the commander approached, settling down in the dirt beside her. He didn't speak for a while. Finally he said, "You know, you've changed the way people see what's possible. Not just in this unit. Everywhere." Sophia turned her eyes from the stars back to the earth. Her voice was quiet, steady. "What's possible has never been the problem. Belief has." The commander studied her, then nodded slowly. He understood. The Sniper Queen wasn't just a name. It was a reminder, to allies and enemies alike, that limits existed only until someone shattered them. And Sophia had no intention of stopping now. The weeks after the mountain mission were different from anything Sophia had experienced. Her name was no longer just whispered among soldiers. It was being spoken in halls of power. Reports of her 3,000-meter training shot had already spread, but now, with the confirmed elimination of a high-value insurgent commander, her reputation transformed from rumor into fact. Generals cited her as proof of precision warfare's future. Politicians referenced her in speeches about deterrence and dominance. To them she was a symbol, a tool to inspire confidence at home and fear abroad. But symbols drew enemies, not only on the battlefield but in boardrooms and war rooms. Some within the military brass didn't like what she represented. A lone operator who could do with one bullet what entire battalions struggled to achieve threatened the balance of recognition, funding, even egos. Behind closed doors, whispers grew. Was it wise to put so much faith in a single soldier? Could one woman really hold the weight of strategy on her shoulders? Sophia ignored it outwardly. She still rose early, trained harder than anyone, and maintained her rifle with the devotion of a craftsman. But she noticed the changes. The new attention meant more eyes on her. Journalists requesting interviews, foreign allies asking to observe her training, commanders pushing for her presence on missions less for necessity and more for spectacle. She had become both an asset and a target of politics, and in war politics could be as dangerous as bullets. It was during this tense time that a new mission landed on her desk. Intelligence had pinpointed a meeting of multiple insurgent leaders deep inside a canyon settlement, far beyond the reach of ground forces. A drone strike was possible, but civilian presence made it risky. The alternative was a sniper shot, one so long and so complex that it bordered on madness. Over 3,200 meters, across swirling desert winds, through the canyon's shifting heat haze. The planners hesitated. The probability of success was razor thin. But when Sophia's name came up, the hesitation faded into possibility. The night before the operation, she sat in her quarters, the MRAD disassembled on the table in front of her. Piece by piece, she cleaned and reassembled it, her hands moving with muscle memory while her mind weighed the coming task. This shot wasn't just another test of skill, it was a political gamble. If she failed, the critics waiting in the shadows would call her a myth undone. If she succeeded, she would become something greater than legend, she would become proof that warfare itself had changed. At dawn, the unit moved into position. The desert stretched endlessly, the canyon far in the distance like a scar in the earth. Sophia lay prone on a ridge, her rifle aligned, the sun already baking the rocks beneath her. Through her scope, she could just make out the faint outlines of figures gathering in the canyon square. Her spotter, a veteran sergeant assigned specifically to work with her, rattled off wind readings, humidity, barometric pressure. She listened, calculated, adjusted. Even with all the data, so much of it came down to instinct. The feel of the air, the rhythm of the world breathing. Time crawled. Below, the insurgent leaders moved together, conferring. Guards patrolled the edges. Civilians passed nearby, children darting between homes. The shot wasn't just long, it was unforgiving. A single miscalculation and she would risk lives she didn't intend to take. Her finger brushed the trigger, then eased back. Not yet. Patience was the essence of her craft. She slowed her breathing, calmed her pulse, felt the earth under her body. The target finally stepped into the open, standing in the center of the square, gesturing broadly to his men. The moment crystallized. Sophia exhaled, her body still, her world narrowing to scope, crosshairs and silence. She squeezed. The rifle cracked, the recoil steady against her shoulder. The round soared, vanishing into distance, carrying her will across 3 kilometers of hostile air. For seconds, nothing. Then in the canyon below, the target collapsed mid-gesture, his lieutenants freezing in shock. Shouts followed, chaos rippling outward, but the civilians were untouched. One bullet had ended the gathering before it began. The spotter exhaled a curse, shaking his head. 3,200 meters. God help me, you actually did it. Sophia didn't move. She chambered another round, scanned for secondary threats, her face calm. But inside a shift stirred. She had known she could do it, but now the world would know too. By the time they exfiltrated, the storm had already begun. High command lit up with reports. International news picked up the story within hours. Headlines screamed of the impossible shot, the sniper queen, once again rewriting the rulebook. Videos of talking heads debated whether it marked a new age of warfare. Military leaders studied the ballistics, questioning what weapons and training might replicate such a feat. Politicians seized on the narrative, some praising her as a national hero, others questioning the ethics of turning one soldier into the face of war. In the barracks, her fellow operators looked at her differently now. No more smirks, no more dismissive glances. There was respect, yes, but also distance. She had crossed into territory few could follow, and that separation left her standing alone even among her own. That night, Sophia sat outside the forward operating base, the desert stars sprawling above. She thought back to the laughter on the training range, the sneers that had once haunted her. Now those voices were gone, replaced by silence and history. She rested her hands on the MRAD across her lap, the steel cool in the night air. She wasn't thinking of headlines or records. She was thinking of the weight of each trigger pull, the lives altered by her bullets, the balance between precision and consequence. For the world she was a legend. For her, she was still just a sniper, alone with her rifle, alone with her choices, and with the knowledge that every shot echoed far beyond the sound of the bullet. Sophia had always known that fame on the battlefield was a double-edged blade. The same stories that inspired allies also painted crosshairs on her back. After the canyon shot, the enemy no longer spoke of her as rumor or ghost. They named her directly in intercepted communications. Leaflets surfaced in villages with her face crudely printed on them, offering rewards for capture or proof of her death. Insurgent commanders ordered their fighters. If you see the woman with the long rifle, kill her first. At first, Sophia brushed it off. She told herself it was just noise, the same bravado enemies always used to boost morale. But the truth came crashing in 2 weeks later, during a patrol meant to secure a mountain pass. She wasn't even in the sniper role that day, just moving with a convoy of armored vehicles when the ambush struck. Explosions tore into the lead Humvee, flames blooming against the rocks. Gunfire erupted from cliffs above. In seconds, chaos swallowed the narrow road. Sophia dove for cover, dragging a wounded soldier behind the wheel of a truck. Rounds clattered against metal, sparks bursting in the dust. She returned fire with her sidearm, precise, calm, but outgunned. Then she heard it, shouts echoing through the canyon. Words she understood even without translation. The sniper queen. Take her alive. The realization cut cold through her chest. This ambush wasn't random. It was designed for her. She moved quickly, grabbing her MRAD from the truck's rack. The rifle felt heavier in that moment, not just steel and polymer but responsibility. Sliding onto the ground, she crawled to a position with sight lines on the cliffs. Through her scope, she picked out figures firing down, insurgents with machine guns, RPGs and rifles. She fired once, twice, 3 times. Each shot dropped a threat before it could reload or reposition. But for every one she felled, 2 more seemed to appear. The convoy's radio crackled with desperate voices. The commander's orders broke through. We need overwatch. Queen, can you clear us a path? She didn't hesitate. Moving to higher ground, Sophia planted herself on a ledge. Her breathing steadied, her mind shifted into that tunnel where nothing existed but targets and trajectories. Bullets hissed past, some close enough to tug her sleeve, but she didn't flinch. Shot after shot, she carved through the ambush. Men who had come to kill her dropped before they even realized they were exposed. One RPG gunner took aim at the convoy, only to collapse with a round through his chest. Another insurgent leader tried to rally fighters, waving his arm. Sophia ended him with a single breath. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally the gunfire thinned. The surviving insurgents broke, fleeing back into the mountains. The convoy was battered, 2 vehicles smoking wrecks, several wounded, but alive. And they were alive because of her. When the dust settled, soldiers moved around her with awe in their eyes. She caught fragments of whispers, "She saved us, she turned the whole fight," but Sophia felt no triumph. She sat on the rock, rifle across her knees, staring at the bodies littering the cliffs. For every enemy she had dropped, she knew another would take his place. The legend of the Sniper Queen wasn't just growing, it was feeding the enemy's hunger to destroy her. Back at base, debriefing stretched for hours. Intelligence confirmed what she already suspected. The ambush had been orchestrated around her presence. Word of her transfer to the convoy had leaked, either through spies or intercepted comms. She wasn't just part of the war anymore, she had become a prize, a symbol the enemy wanted to shatter. Some commanders argued she should be pulled from the field. "She's too valuable to risk," one colonel said during a heated meeting. "One bullet and we lose the most effective sniper we've ever had." Others pushed back. "What makes her valuable is exactly that risk. If they fear her, we use that fear. Keep her in the field." Sophia listened quietly, her expression still. Inside she wrestled with the weight of it. She had always been a soldier, defined by discipline and duty. But now she was becoming something else. An icon, a shadow looming in both allies' hopes and enemies' nightmares. She wondered how long a person could carry that without breaking. That night, sleep evaded her. She sat in her bunk cleaning the MRAD piece by piece, the motions grounding her. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts drifted to the ambush. She remembered the way their shouts had carried her name, the desperation in their voices. They weren't just fighting an enemy, they were fighting a legend they had convinced themselves could bleed. When dawn came, she stood outside watching the sun climb over the desert. The air was cool, sharp, filled with the scent of dust and fuel. She thought about quitting just for a moment. Thought about leaving the battlefield, disappearing somewhere her name carried no weight. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came. Too many depended on her. Too many lives had been spared because of her precision. The battlefield wasn't done with the Sniper Queen, and she wasn't done with it. As the day's orders came in, she shouldered her rifle case once more. Somewhere out there, enemies whispered her name with hate, allies with hope. She carried both like the weight of her rifle. And with every mission, every trigger pull, she understood a truth that no headline or debriefing could capture. Legends weren't born by choice, they were forged when the world left no other path. The months following Sophia's record-breaking shot were a blur of interviews, ceremonies, and endless retellings of that one moment. Governments hailed her, military academies studied her, and even civilians who had never held a rifle spoke her name with reverence. She was no longer just Sergeant Sophia Hale, she had become the Sniper Queen, the woman who reached across 3 kilometers of open air and struck history. Yet, as much as the world celebrated her, Sophia felt the weight of that name pressing harder than any medal could. It was as though the world wanted her to be an icon, flawless and eternal, rather than a human woman who still woke in the middle of the night hearing the echo of her own rifle shot. The army shifted her role almost immediately after the shot. She was taken from the front lines, placed into advanced training divisions, and assigned to special demonstration missions. Young soldiers would sit before her, their eyes wide, waiting for the legendary Sophia to impart secrets that no book or instructor could. She taught them about patience, the necessity of stillness, the way a sniper's breath aligned with the heartbeats of the world. But as she explained, she realized many of them were expecting magic, some hidden formula that had allowed her to pull off the impossible. She told them the truth instead. It wasn't magic, it was thousands of hours of practice, discipline, and the absolute refusal to let fear dictate a single motion. Some looked disappointed, but the ones who truly listened understood that greatness was not a gift. It was earned drop by drop, hour by hour. Outside the classroom, Sophia often found herself surrounded by reporters and dignitaries. They wanted her to smile, to pose with the MRAD rifle that had carried her into history, to retell the story as if it were a fable. She played along, but inside she wrestled with unease. Because the truth, the one no reporter wanted to hear, was that her shot had not been about glory. It had been about saving lives. The enemy commander she had struck down had been moments away from ordering a bombardment that would have obliterated her unit. The record-breaking shot was not a choice of prestige but of survival. The world seemed to forget that behind every celebrated trigger pull lay the ending of a life, and though Sophia carried no regret for that mission, she carried the burden of balance. Life saved on one side, life taken on the other. One night, long after the parades and medals had faded into routine, Sophia sat alone in the armory. The MRAD lay across her knees, the barrel gleaming under the dim light. She ran her fingers along the steel, remembering every notch, every moment of care she had given the weapon. It had become more than a tool, it was an extension of her, an object that had listened silently as she carved her place into history. Yet she wondered if it had also caged her, locking her identity into a single narrative, the woman of the 3,000-meter shot. Was that all she would ever be? Did the world care about Sophia Hale, the woman who laughed with her squadmates, who cherished the letters from her sister, who longed sometimes for a quiet life beyond the crosshairs? Her thoughts were interrupted by Captain Rivera, who entered quietly and leaned against the wall. "You're not sleeping again?" he said softly. He was one of the few who had known her before the legend, back when she was just another soldier pushing herself harder than anyone else. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the weight behind the steady facade. "They'll keep asking for you, you know. They'll keep parading you around as long as you let them." Sophia gave a tired smile. "It's strange, isn't it? One shot, and suddenly the world thinks I'm something more than human. But all I did was what any sniper would do, take the shot I had trained for." Her voice faltered slightly. "Only difference is I hit it." Rivera studied her in silence, then said, "That's the difference between history and the forgotten. You hit it. And because you did, you've saved more people than you'll ever know." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "But don't let the world decide who you are. You're more than that one moment. You always have been." The words lingered in her mind long after he left. For the first time in months she felt a sliver of peace. Perhaps the world would always remember her as the sniper queen, but she could choose how she carried that crown. Not as a burden, not as a cage, but as proof of her dedication, her sacrifice, her humanity sharpened into precision. The next morning, Sophia stood before a new group of recruits, the youngest generation of snipers in training. Their eyes shone with awe, but Sophia looked past the hero worship. She spoke not of records, not of glory, but of responsibility. "Every bullet you fire," she told them, "carries weight. It is not a number, it is not a mark on a scoreboard, it is a decision, a burden, and a life. Remember that before you celebrate the distance or the precision." She paused, scanning their faces. "Your duty is not to be remembered. Your duty is to protect. If you do that, history will decide the rest." The room was silent, the air heavy with the gravity of her words. In that silence Sophia felt something shift. She no longer needed to prove herself to anyone, not to the world, not even to her own doubts. She had already done what she was meant to do. Now her mission was different: to guide, to teach, to ensure that the legends of tomorrow understood the price of the path they walked. For the first time since that 3,000-meter shot, Sophia felt in control of her story again. She was not just a sniper. She was a soldier, a teacher, and above all, a human being who had chosen her duty over everything else. The world could keep its crown. She had already found her truth. Sophia lay flat against the rocky ridge, her cheek pressed to the dirt, her heartbeat steady like the rhythm of a metronome. The sun was beginning its slow decline, streaking the horizon with shades of amber and violet. Around her, the silence of the valley was broken only by the faint whisper of the wind and the subtle shifting of her spotter, Harris, who adjusted the spotting scope with a steady hand. They had been waiting here for hours, tracking the convoy that intelligence insisted would arrive. This was no ordinary convoy. It carried a man who had orchestrated the deaths of hundreds, a ruthless commander who operated from the shadows, using mercenaries and insurgents like pieces on a board. If Sophia succeeded in this mission, she would not only take down a high-value target but also cement her reputation as one of the greatest snipers in modern history. Her rifle lay before her, the MRAD carefully calibrated for the impossible task. 3,000 meters. A shot so long it bent the limits of physics, demanding perfect alignment of ballistics, wind, temperature, and terrain. Few snipers dared attempt it. Fewer succeeded. Sophia knew failure was not an option. Around her, the team relied on her to deliver. The operation hinged on one trigger pull, one breath, one bullet traveling farther than most soldiers could even see. Through her scope, she caught sight of movement on the distant road. Dust rose in plumes, shimmering in the evening light. The convoy appeared as specks at first, tiny shadows against the desert plain, but as the vehicles grew clearer, Harris murmured coordinates under his breath. "Target vehicle. Third in line, black armored truck." "Confirm?" Sophia adjusted, her scope settling on the shape. It was a fortress on wheels, reinforced and shielded, but no armor could withstand a .338 Lapua round delivered with surgical precision. "Confirmed," she whispered. Her lips barely moved, her voice carried only to Harris. She studied the vehicle's movements, calculating speed, distance, trajectory. The air was calm now, but Sophia knew even the slightest gust could ruin everything. Wind was a sniper's greatest enemy, invisible yet merciless. She adjusted her dope card, checking values again, triple confirming. Her mind worked like a machine, cycling through variables. Humidity, temperature, bullet drop, Coriolis effect, spin drift. Each factor carried weight, each adjustment the difference between glory and failure. Her breathing slowed as the world narrowed to the circle of glass before her. She could see the armored truck more clearly now, its surface gleaming faintly in the last rays of sun. A guard leaned from the side, scanning the horizon, but their eyes could never find her. Sophia was a ghost, a shadow blending into the earth itself. That invisibility had always been her strength, striking from distances that seemed impossible, unseen and unstoppable. Range confirmed, 3,006 meters, Harris murmured, his voice even but tense. Wind negligible. You're good, Sophia. This is yours. Sophia flexed her trigger hand, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility in her fingers.